defamation lawsuit filed against the media tycoon Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street. In a defamation lawsuit, President Trump is seeking at least $10 billion in damages in a defamation lawsuit filed against the media tycoon Rupert Murdoch and the Wall Street Journal. It comes after the paper reported on a 50th birthday note Mr. Trump allegedly wrote to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in 2003, featuring a sketch of a naked woman. In a post on his Truth Social platform, he says, "We've just filed a powerhouse lawsuit against everyone involved in publishing the false, malicious, defamatory fake news article in the useless rag that is the Wall Street Journal." Dow Jones, which owns the Wall Street Journal, says it will vigorously defend itself against the Trump lawsuit. Meanwhile, the US Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has asked a court to unseal grand jury transcripts from the original case against Mr. Epstein, 6 years after he died by suicide in jail, where he was awaiting trial for sex offences. Mr. Trump has faced mounting pressure from many of his own core supporters to share the information after he promised to release files relating to Mr. Epstein during his presidential campaign. Our North America editor, Sarah Smith, has the report.
Try as he might, Donald Trump cannot ignore the Epstein scandal. The questions about his relationship with the sex offender and what information the government holds about him just keep coming. It's no secret that Donald Trump knew and partied with Jeffrey Epstein. He'd rather forget about this, of course, and so is furious that details of a lewd letter, including a drawing of a naked woman he apparently sent to Epstein, have been published. He posted on social media, "The Wall Street Journal printed a fake letter supposedly to Epstein. These are not my words, not the way I talk. Also, I don't draw pictures."
Make some noise if you care about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal.
Unusually, Donald Trump is being attacked by some of his most ardent supporters, angry that he's not published government documents, including the names of Epstein's clients. 6 months ago, the Attorney General said she was preparing to publish Epstein's so-called client list.
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
After falling out with Donald Trump, Elon Musk posted on X in June that Trump is in the Epstein files. The White House rubbished the post, which Musk later deleted. Last week, the Department of Justice concluded Epstein did not have a client list that could implicate high-profile people and that he did take his own life, contradicting long-held right-wing beliefs. Earlier this week, President Trump declared the whole Epstein conspiracy theory was just a hoax. Die-hard Trump fans are demonstrating their fury, feeling they've been deceived and demanding the Epstein files be published.
Burn, baby, burn.
Right-wing podcasters, complete with tin hats, will not let this go.
Obviously, the Trump administration is trying to cover up. Something changed because they ran on this idea of exposing it all.
Mr. Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is in the firing line over this.
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein.
And now, to try to satisfy his angry base, he's ordered her to try and get at least some of the evidence the prosecution gathered against Jeffrey Epstein and make it public.
Like a desecration, but...
Well, we're going to stay with the story and speak to Dr. Richard Johnson, the Senior Lecturer in US Politics and Policy at Queen Mary University here in London. Hello and welcome to the programme. I wonder, first off, what do you make of this lawsuit, President Trump himself describing it as historic?
Well, it's very much Donald Trump's style throughout his entire business and political career. When he finds himself in some trouble, he launches a lawsuit. In terms of the politics of this, I mean, what Donald Trump, I suppose, needs to do for his own political sake on this is to send the message to his supporters that this is some kind of conspiracy against him, some kind of attack against him. Because at the moment, it's an unusual issue where you see very high levels of support among both Democrats and Republicans for releasing all the files. About 85% of Democrats and 75% of Republicans want all the files released. So Trump needs to, in fact, polarize the issue and to say, don't fall for this. It's the Democrats who are attacking me. It's the Republicans who have never come on board with MAGA, etc. And I think that's sort of also what he's trying to do here with this lawsuit.
What is he risking here? Because if once those files are released and there is damaging material in there, how can his team fight that?
Well, in a sense, Trump is currently reaping what he sowed to an extent. I mean, his entree into the presidency was partly as a result of Trump fueling conspiracy theories about Barack Obama's place of birth or what was on Hillary Clinton's computer servers. And all throughout the Biden presidency, Donald Trump's outriders were suggesting that Biden was covering up something from the Epstein files. And Trump has now appointed many of these people into senior positions in his administration, including the FBI director. Once they came in, clearly there has been something that's caused them to reassess the wisdom of releasing it. There may be good reasons for that. For example, some of these are sealed by the courts, and you don't want to release files that may endanger innocent people, both people who gave testimony, but also maybe people who have been accused but are innocent. A less good reason for this is to protect Donald Trump, and I suppose that's the big question: is he doing this to protect himself, or are there other legal reasons why the administration is not moving on this?
Dr. Johnson, I appreciate you're not a lawyer. However, defamation lawsuits in the US and here in the UK certainly are very they have a very high bar that has been set. I mean, what will need to be proven in order for the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch and the parent company to win this case?
I think the issue is not so much what it'll take to win the case. It's actually about trying to muddy the waters for the Wall Street Journal and for other outlets. In a sense, I'm not sure Trump's expecting this to go to some kind of trial. I think he's looking for some kind of settlement, some kind of agreement, some kind of arrangement where either the Wall Street Journal retracts what they've said, or they qualify it, or even if it carries on and on, as these trials do for months and indeed years, it's sufficiently off-putting for other outlets who don't want to face the potential of either high levels of legal jeopardy or also just the time and resources that it will take to fight the case. And that, again, has been very much Donald Trump style all throughout his adult life.
Yeah, battles with the media. Dr. Richard Johnson, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Donald Trump has a Jeffrey Epstein problem that it seems won't go away. The White House want it to go away. They want to stop talking about the dead, convicted sex offender. But plenty of Republicans do want to talk about him still and do want the White House to do what it said it once would and release all the information it has on Epstein. Welcome to Americast.
Americast from BBC News.
Hello, it's Anthony in the Washington, D.C. Bureau of BBC News.
And it's Justin in the worldwide headquarters of Americast in London, England. And it's just the two of us. And I should say right at the beginning, because events move so fast, don't they, that it's 10 to 3 in the afternoon on Wednesday here in London. And not only do things move fast in the big worldwide world, they also move fast, of course, in politics, don't they, Anthony? We've got this phrase in Britain, a week is a long time in politics. A previous British Prime Minister came up with it. It's certainly a long time in American politics at the moment, and specifically with regard to Jeffrey Epstein. So this is what Donald Trump said to a reporter last week who tried to ask Pam Bondi being the Attorney General, a question about the Epstein files.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success and also tragedy with what happened in Texas. It just seems like a desecration, but you go ahead.
Well, all right. This, though, is what he said to reporters on Tuesday of this week on the grounds of the White House.
I would say that, these files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, they were made up by the Biden information, we went through years of that with the Russia hoax, with all of the different things that we had to go through. We've gone through years of it, but she's handled it very well, and it's going to be up to her. Whatever she thinks is credible, she should release, yeah.
She should release, she being Pam Bondi. And then, later on that same day, he reverted back to questioning why anyone should care at all about Jeffrey Epstein.
Mr. President, I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein story and so upset about how it's been handled?
I don't understand it. Why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And the credible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going.
Anthony, your take?
Well, obviously, Donald Trump's trying to change the subject, and he's not doing a very good job of it. We talk about how Donald Trump can drive the news cycle, and that's one of his superpowers. But here he's telling people there's nothing to see here, move on, and they're not moving on. And it's because that this is something that Donald Trump's base has been fixated on for years, and that Donald Trump and those around him have promised there'd be some sort of a big revelation. And now they've come out and said, actually, there's nothing there. Let's move on. And I think that's why it's been such a challenge for Trump. And clearly he's getting frustrated.
Yeah, and significant people in the party are not letting him get away with it, are they? So, and not just on the kind of extremes of the party. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, you might expect to be in that camp, the very kind of wild-eyed congresswoman, if that's a reasonable description of her. She might not accept it, but there we go. Speaker Mike Johnson, though, who's not wild-eyed at all, very much a Trump supporter, but very much someone who marshals the wider party, certainly the wider congressional party. They've both called for transparency, haven't they? This word transparency, and separate interviews with the commentator Benny Johnson. And that's something Marjorie Taylor Greene repeated to CNN's Manu Raju yesterday.
This is something that's been talked about by many people serving in the administration, myself and many others on the right and the left, of there needing to be transparency of the rich and powerful elites that were in his circle while he was just one of the worst serial abusers of young women. It has been a very serious situation for the administration and a lot of people in MAGA. They really want to know more information about the people that were involved with Jeffrey Epstein. And is there a blackmail list? And are there foreign countries' governments involved? And there's nothing wrong with people continuing to ask that.
And I think that's the challenge here for Donald Trump is that, as you hear from Marjorie Taylor Greene there, this cuts against one of the central messages of Donald Trump's political identity. And that is that the rich and powerful are taking advantage of this country, that they're looking out for themselves. And it is Donald Trump who is on the side of the little guy, of the outsiders, the people who aren't rich and powerful, the people who aren't part of the elite. And he's pulling back the curtain and revealing their excesses. And he's fighting for the little guy. And here is a case now where it looks, at least to some people, that Donald Trump isn't pulling back the curtain. He's part of the cover-up, and he has something to hide. And while there's not any kind of substance that we've seen that ties Donald Trump to Epstein, or that there is an Epstein client list, and any indication that if there were, Donald Trump was on it, it's difficult for Trump to dispel, and it also puts him in the unfortunate or the difficult position of trying to convince his supporters that the rich and powerful in this case don't have anything to hide.
Yeah, and when you say his supporters, I think the really interesting point is that it is not just the kind of classic conspiracy theorists. It's not just people who think that the moon landings were faked or that COVID didn't exist or whatever. It's a wider group of people, and we've had a fascinating question about that from Andy in Eastbourne. Let's play it.
I've been listening to Americast since before Trump's first presidency and find it very insightful. I was, however, surprised when I heard the episode about Jeffrey Epstein causing a MAGA rift. You seem to imply that Trump being involved with anything Epstein-related is a conspiracy theory, rather like the JFK being killed or the moon landing hoax. I'm not generally a conspiracy theory believer, but I think there's a lot more smoke or fact around the fact that Trump is likely to be named somewhere in the Epstein recordings than not.
And the reason I think Andy is dead right is not necessarily what he says about Donald Trump, but I absolutely agree with his implication, which is that you do not have to be an out-and-out conspiracy theorist in order to believe that there is something very fishy about the whole Epstein business and what happened to him and all the details of the case. Remember the court case against him, which never came to anything because there wasn't a court case against him because he was found dead in prison, apparently by suicide. So that there is this kind of interesting, it seems to me, difference and really politically relevant difference between the kind of crazed conspiracy theorists and a much wider group of people. And Anthony, you see this, don't you, in the kind of coalition of people who are uneasy now about it all being put to bed and the subject being changed. You look at some of the podcasters, kind of Trump-adjacent podcasters, not necessarily in with him, but people who've been interested in him in the past, kind of saying, hang on a second, we didn't go for this, we didn't vote for this. We thought when you said you were going to open up, the deep state and you were going to do all the things that you were going to do and be transparent about government, we kind of took you at your word. And we're pretty disappointed now that you don't seem to be doing that. And I don't know what you think, Anthony. It just seems to me that the political danger for Trump, it's not from the wild extremes. It's from people, even probably who regard themselves actually as independents and liked him and now feel pretty hacked off.
Yeah, there's a poll that came out today, and 80% of the public said that there needed to be more revelations, needed to be full disclosure of any documents on Epstein that the federal government has. And I mean, if you can get 80% of the American public to agree on anything, that is a pretty remarkable feat.
And a frightening one for the Trump people.
Yeah, I mean, it should be frightening. And, we also should say that, while there is no evidence linking Donald Trump to any of these allegations surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, there is evidence linking the two men. I mean, they both were from Palm Beach, South Florida. They both traveled in the same social circles. There's a famous photograph that gets circulated all the time now of Donald Trump and Epstein kind of standing shoulder to shoulder, smiling. There's a video of the two men together. And Michael Wolff, who's an American journalist who, some people say is a sensationalist, and they've questioned some of his reporting. But he had lengthy conversations with Jeffrey Epstein in 2018, I think it was, where Epstein told him on recordings about what he said was a close relationship he had with Donald Trump dating back to the 1980s. So there are data points that show that these two people had contact, and that when you start drawing conclusions and people making surmising the relationships and extrapolating from that, then you get to where these conspiracy theories start to pop up. But certainly anything that Donald Trump has done over the past week hasn't been successful in downplaying that relationship. If anything, it's raised new questions.
Yeah, and the questions, of course, about Donald Trump, but also more widely questions, and this kind of goes, doesn't it, to the whole politics of MAGA. It's questions about a whole group of people, including senior Democrats, they believe, who have kind of lauded it over the nation and been able to get away with stuff, including horrible stuff, criminal stuff, that they, the ordinary people, have not had any kind of way of stopping or window on. And it's that kind of sense, isn't it? That sense of the outsiders taking control of Washington that was so much of the power behind Trump. And if they then get told, it's nice to see here, you can understand why politically it kind of doesn't work for him, does it?
Yeah, there was someone who had three possible explanations for how Trump handled this. And the first one is that they came into this knowing that there wasn't anything to this, to the Epstein files, and they were lying about it in order to gain political advantage. Two, that they came into this thinking that there was something to the Epstein files, but once they got into government and looked into it, there was nothing there. Or they came into this taking advantage of the hubbub surrounding Epstein, they got into power, found out that there was something there, and they're covering all of this up. And all three of those scenarios aren't exactly good for Donald Trump. I mean, even in the best case scenario, they were misleading people, and now they were kind of trafficking in conspiracy theories, and now they found out that there's nothing to them, and they're trying to explain that. That's the most innocent explanation for this, and it's still not one that is politically beneficial to Trump.
No, I mean, it's staggeringly politically inept, isn't it, to march people up a hill and then to have nothing when you get to the top of it. And then you get to people like the FBI director, Kash Patel, the deputy director, this guy, Dan Bongino, who we were understanding was maybe going to resign because they had been absolutely in the forefront of all of this stuff, and they kind of drove them into the FBI. And suddenly they're there, and Pam Bondi's saying there's nothing to see, and their supporters are saying, hang on a second, you're right, guys, what's going on? It's left them in really difficult positions, even if they don't resign.
Yeah, and Pam Bondi definitely mishandled this. I mean, she said at one point to the gathered press that she had the files on her desk, was reviewing them, implying even that she had Epstein's client list on her desk. And she later had to walk that back, and she meant just the FBI report, and she was looking into all of the report on what they had and didn't have. But when she said that before the cameras, it sounded pretty definitive, like there was going to be a big revelation soon. And of course, when there wasn't, that's when you had people on the outside, people in kind of the right-wing ecosystems up in arms, and you had people in the FBI who, as you mentioned, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, who have trafficked in conspiracy theories, who do think that there's an elite cabal that is running this country and is out to get people. Had them running foursquare into Pam Bondi and creating this kind of a conflict between Donald Trump's own Justice Department and the FBI, which is an agency underneath the Justice Department and answerable to Pam Bondi.
If they stay in post, okay, and if they do kind of successfully push it all off the news agenda, and Donald Trump is very good at that, as we know, to our cost, something else could well come up by the time people are listening to this episode. If they manage...
See how managing finances and customers powers your business growth, all on the Intuit QuickBooks platform.
Much as he'd like the story to disappear, Donald Trump can't yet shake the allegations linking him with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He's even gone so far as to sue his old ally Rupert Murdoch over a story that appeared in his newspaper, The Wall Street Journal. And Robert's joining us from Washington tonight. You've been charting this story for us throughout this week and beyond. Robert, this announcement that this lawsuit is going ahead has just come in the last few minutes. The president just can't shake this conspiracy theory off, can he?
I mean, that is absolutely true, Julie, for Trump's loyalists, for the sort of MAGA base. I mean, this is a sort of a gigantic sense of betrayal with the president. Remember, this is, one of the most entrenched and powerful conspiracy theories of recent years, that Jeffrey Epstein 6 years ago was murdered in his prison cell, that he didn't commit suicide in order to silence him, that his alleged client list would expose some of the Washington elites as pedophiles. And Trump supporters always felt that Trump would get to the bottom. This is, one of the most entrenched and powerful conspiracy theories of recent years, that Jeffrey Epstein 6 years ago was murdered in his prison cell, that he didn't commit suicide in order to silence him, that his alleged client list would expose some of the Washington elites as pedophiles. And Trump supporters always felt that Trump would get to the bottom of this, that he would somehow expose the so-called deep state, which is why, Julie, there was so much shock today and this week when Trump said, look, actually, there is no smoking gun, and he urged his supporters to get over their obsession. And today there was this fresh development with the story in the Wall Street Journal that claimed that in 2003, Donald Trump had written to Jeffrey Epstein a rather kind of crude letter with a sort of a crude image in it as well, suggesting that they had a shared secret. Now, Trump was outraged by this, denied that letter came from him, and he posted these words on his social media posting. He said, I told Rupert Murdoch it was a scam and he shouldn't print this fake story, but he did, and I'm now going to sue his ass off and that of his third-rate newspaper. And as you say, in the last few minutes, Donald Trump has said that he will take libel action against Murdoch, against the Wall Street Journal, and against the two reporters. This is, in essence, Trump trying to circle the wagon, targeting a more traditional enemy, namely the media. He's also asked his Attorney General to release some documents from the Epstein court filings as well. So the inescapable irony here is that this is a conspiracy-minded president who is now getting distracted, deflected, and furious over a conspiracy theory being pushed by his own strongest supporters.
Scandal he is now drowning in because Donald Trump went silent today all day about the scandal he is now drowning in because of his relationship with a child rapist, a rich child rapist, raper of children, who was found dead in his cell in a federal prison in Manhattan, awaiting federal trial for sex trafficking charges in a prison that was controlled by Donald Trump's Justice Department at the time. Donald Trump, child rapist, a rich child rapist, raper of children, who was found dead in his cell in a federal prison in Manhattan, awaiting federal trial for sex trafficking charges in a prison that was controlled by Donald Trump's Justice Department at the time. Donald Trump is the only president in history who has had such a friend, who he is now claiming was not his friend. J.D. Vance went silent today about Donald Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The last thing J.D. Vance said about it last night was the worst thing J.D. Vance could have said last night. J.D. Vance, in a social media post, demanded the release of the letter that the Wall Street Journal wrote an article about last night, which it says bears Donald Trump's name and is a birthday letter to Jeffrey Epstein in 2003 that ends with the line, "May every day be another wonderful secret." Letter to Jeffrey Epstein in 2003 that ends with the line, "May every day be another wonderful secret."
But the spectre of his old friend just... Donald Trump keeps saying it's time to move on from Jeffrey Epstein, but the spectre of his old friend just won't go away. Now, the Wall Street Journal says it has details of a message from Trump in an album created for Epstein's 50th birthday, in the form of a naked woman's outline, Trump's famously idiosyncratic signature allegedly standing in for her pubic hair. Inside the drawing, the Journal says, typed text depicts a conversation between the two men. Voiceover, there must be more to life than having everything. Donald, yes there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey, nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Donald Trump keeps saying it's time to move on from Jeffrey Epstein, but the spectre of his old friend just won't go away. Now, the Wall Street Journal says it has details of a message from Trump in an album created for Epstein's 50th birthday, in the form of a naked woman's outline, Trump's famously idiosyncratic signature allegedly standing in for her pubic hair. Inside the drawing, the journal says, typed text depicts a conversation between the two men. Voiceover, there must be more to life than having everything. Donald, yes there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey, nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes we do, come to think of it. Donald, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me last time I saw you. Donald, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. The report contains President Trump's response. This is not me, he says. This is a fake thing. It's a fake Wall Street Journal story. I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women. It's not my language. It's not my words. Later, he took to his Truth Social app, promising to sue the Wall Street Journal, its parent company News Corp, and proprietor Rupert Murdoch shortly, noting recent victories against TV networks ABC and CBS, calling the journal a disgusting and filthy rag, and once again dismissing the story as the Epstein hoax. Trump then went on to instruct his under-fire Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to move to release any pertinent grand jury testimony from the convicted pedophiles' criminal cases. But that's not what Trump had long promised his supporters, and it's not what Democrats are now calling for.
Whereas our resolution says all documents, records, and communications, theirs says all credible documents, records, and communications. Well, who's going to decide that? Attorney General Bondi, in conjunction with Donald Trump, who today said that a letter that he wrote to Jeffrey Epstein on his birthday, which is published, which has all of the indicia of credibility, is not credible. That wouldn't be included. Let's release the real Epstein file.
Democrats couldn't seem to find a single thing to say about Epstein when President Biden was in office, but now they want to make this the centerpiece of their entire conversation.
But much of the criticism is centered on Trump's own handling of this story.
Democrats couldn't seem to find a single thing to say about Epstein when President Biden was in office, but now they want to make this the centerpiece of their entire conversation.
But much of the criticism is centered on Trump's own handling of this story. For a man often feted for his instinctive political smarts, his admonitions to his supporters, to the country, just to move on, have come across as tone deaf.
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net, and so they try and do the Democrats' work.
Will you ask Attorney General Pam Bondi to release more documents to finally put this controversy to bed?
Yeah, whatever's credible, she can release. If a document is credible, if a document's there that is credible, she can release. I think it's good. But it's just a subject. He's dead. He's gone.
In MAGA podcast world, though, Jeffrey Epstein lives on.
I can tell you right now, Gen Z is really fired up about this, especially young men. I mean, we're getting flooded with thousands, hundreds of thousands of comments that are very unhappy about this.
And Democrats are queuing up in front of an open goal.
So basically, the plan from the Biden administration was slip in some fake files about Donald Trump to incriminate him or to embarrass him. Don't do anything with it.
Sleeper cells.
Leave office, thinking that maybe Donald Trump would win again, and then the whole thing would blow up in his face. That is the logic that Donald Trump has laid out.
Well, so yes, and that is why, as you just said, Jane, like this has been an unmitigated disaster from a PR perspective for Trump. And some of these biggest bootlickers, the kind of bucket of either Trump made or built a huge profile because of him, like the parts of the MAGA movement, they're like begging him to shift strategies.
Even the Republican Speaker of the House had called earlier this week for everything to be put out there, now trying to minimize any apparent difference with the president.
We trust the American people in their judgment, and we're for that. The president is for that, and there's different ways everybody expresses the same truth.
Trump has long had an aversion to personal scrutiny. He was convicted of 34 felonies in the hush money trial involving the former adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Trump has long had an aversion to personal scrutiny. He was convicted of 34 felonies in the hush money trial involving the former adult film actress Stormy Daniels. It's far from clear whether or to what extent Trump himself appears in documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, but his handling of that question is already doing him serious political damage. Well, joining me now is the columnist, former deputy editor of the Sunday Times and director of the Marie Colvin Institute in New York, Sarah Baxter. Thank you very much for joining us. We do have this new piece of data after all of these days and weeks of denial and imprecations to move on from Donald Trump, this pretty extraordinary sounding alleged message from him to Jeffrey Epstein on the occasion of his 50th birthday. What are we to make of it?
Well, this is the story that Trump has been trying to suppress for days. And it explains why he suddenly went into damage limitation mode, saying that the Epstein files were all a Biden or Obama hoax, because it does include some very weird allegations in this purported letter that suggests that he was very pally indeed with Jeffrey Epstein and had sent birthday greetings to him on his 50th birthday, which included the squiggly outline of a naked woman and all kinds of salacious extra bits, shall we say. And it also referred to a secret they shared. Now, we know that Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump attended a Victoria's Secrets party once. Maybe it's something as banal as that. But of course, the use of the word has sent conspiracy mongers into a frenzy.
I mean, he says that it's simply not true, that he doesn't make drawings, he doesn't use that kind of language. As far as he's concerned, this is more fake news.
Yes, and he may be right, perhaps it is fake news, but of course it's published by the Wall Street Journal. Its British editor is Emma Tucker, and it's extremely unlikely that she'd publish anything, especially having received direct pressure from Trump, that is poorly sourced. But unless the original copy of the letter is produced, a lot of MAGA supporters will always have their doubts. And there is some evidence that Trump's biggest boosters are circling the wagons and really rushing to the defense of the president and attacking the Wall Street Journal. But I think this is a dangerous moment for Trump. It's a moment of intense vulnerability because this drip feed of cover-up allegations and the whole concept of a pedophilia cover-up in the deep state or the swamp in Washington has been sort of lapping around Trump now for several weeks. And so this is a very damaging allegation and one that's hard for him to just dismiss as yet another hoax.
For someone as sensitive as Trump, he doesn't want to see anything that associates him in any kind of a way with this man who's become such a figure of speculation and as you say, conspiracy among Trump's own base. So it doesn't necessarily follow that he's necessarily implicated in the worst of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes just for him not to want something to be revealed.
Yes, I mean, Trump has survived many career-ending scandals, from the Access Hollywood tape to Stormy Daniels' saucy revelations, and his base really doesn't care. But it is MAGA supporters who've made the greatest fuss about opening the Jeffrey Epstein files. And in an attempt to appease them, the Justice Secretary, Pam Bondi, has now promised to release transcripts of the grand jury evidence heard about Epstein before he allegedly killed himself in a jail. But actually, these revelations are unlikely to include the so-called client list, which is what MAGA people have been so eager to get their hands on. Whether it exists or not, of course, is entirely speculative. So I think Trump is feeling rather cornered by his own base but by what MAGA itself has said about the Jeffrey Epstein case and links to the deep state. So this is why it's such a big problem for him.
And for someone who's long had a reputation, well-earned or not, for sort of instinctive political smarts, knowing how to talk to a certain voter base, it seems to be very out of touch, tone deaf to his usual supporters.
That remains to be seen. Trump famously said that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue in New York and not lose any votes. So this is being sorely tested, and we'll see how it pans out. He is a famous escapologist who has evaded one scandal after another. It's all made for great plot lines, but I do think this is a serious matter for Trump, and it's the first time that he's felt truly cornered, not by Democrats, but by his own supporters.
Thank you very much, Sarah Baxter. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
In President Trump's latest threat to journalists covering his administration and related scandals, he's threatening to sue the Wall Street Journal after an article was published late Thursday that alleges Trump contributed a sketch drawing of a naked woman to a birthday album for serial sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday, compiled by Ghislaine Maxwell, now in prison for about 20 years. The paper did not publish the sketch, but described it as an outline of a naked woman with Trump's signature scribbled below her waist in a way to mimic pubic hair. The sketch came with a typewritten note the Wall Street Journal called an imaginary conversation between Trump and Epstein, written in the third person. This is the note, quote, "Voiceover, there must be more to life than having everything," the note began. Donald, yes, there is, but I won't tell you what it is. Jeffrey, nor will I, since I also know what it is. Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes, we do, come to think of it. Donald, enigmas never age. Have you noticed that? Jeffrey, as a matter of fact, it was clear to me the last time I saw you. Donald, a pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret, unquote. President Trump has denied he authored the message and is now calling the case the, quote, Epstein hoax. But amidst growing outrage among his MAGA base over the new allegations and their calls for the Department of Justice to release more Epstein files, President Trump said he's directing Attorney General Pam Bondi to seek the release of grand jury testimony, which a judge would have to approve and would likely have little new information, as only a partial set of pages from the massive amount of files that are called the Epstein files. On Thursday, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt was asked if Trump would appoint a special prosecutor in the Epstein case.
Well, the idea was floated from someone in the media to the president. The president would not recommend a special prosecutor in the Epstein case. That's how he feels. And as for his discussions with the attorney general, I'm not sure.
This comes after the Trump administration said Wednesday it had fired longtime U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey, who helped lead the successful prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein and his former girlfriend and accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. Maureen Comey is also the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey, who became a prominent critic of the president after Trump fired him in 2017. Trump on Wednesday dismissed the Epstein story as boring, but said he backed the release of any credible documents. He later lashed out against members of his MAGA movement over demands he release the Epstein files, calling his own supporters weaklings. For more, we're joined by Aswin Subsang, senior political reporter at Rolling Stone, covering the modern American conservative movement and GOP. His newest pieces are headlined Team Trump was on effing warpath to kill story about salacious letter to Epstein, and Inside Trump's frantic failing mission to crush the Epstein MAGA rebellion. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Swin. It's great to have you with us from Cincinnati. Can you start off by explaining to people why the Epstein files have been so critical to the growth of the MAGA movement, have been so much a part of it, along maybe as important as Trump's allegation that the 2020 election was stolen?
Well, since you mentioned his lies about the 2020 presidential election, isn't it funny which conspiracy theories, rabid right-wing modified theories, in which lies from Donald Trump end up getting cemented into official federal government policy and Republican Party doctrine, and which ones are set aside as soon as they become sort of inconvenient for the dear leader? When it comes to his anti-democratic authoritarian lies about elections and the 2020 election across the federal government, in different departments. It is being cemented into actually policy and practice. The lie that the election was stolen from Donald Trump in 2020, and therefore something has to be done about it, and there are all these different crackdowns going on. Now, when it comes to the far-right conspiracy theories about Jeffrey Epstein, suddenly Donald Trump and his government, after saying for months that to their supporters, not the American people specifically, but to their most MAGA-fied, extremely online supporters, we're going to get this done, we're going to do something about it. Suddenly they're taking on a completely across-the-board, full-court press, nothing to see here, folks attitude. It's a stunning reversal because for years, some of the most prominent figures in the MAGA and also mainstream conservative movement, including some of the most senior appointees in Donald Trump's second term, like Dan Bongino and Kash Patel at the FBI, have been fostering these MAGA conspiracy theories about Jeffrey Epstein, saying that his death behind bars in 2019 was likely a murder that was committed to cover up the alleged sins and crimes of a sort of pedophile Democratic Party-run cabal that helps run the so-called deep state, and that these enemies of Donald Trump and MAGA were bumping off Jeffrey Epstein because they were afraid his testimony or the files or what he had to say or his alleged blackmail operations would implicate them. What I just described to you is what I would describe a borderline piece of holy writ and religious understanding within the MAGA movement. This isn't a small thing or conspiracy theory that they adopt or bandy about just because they want to or for fun. Among so much of the so-called MAGA grassroots, this is taken as almost a level of religious principle for them. Donald Trump, in trying to tell a lot of his supporters to move on finally from this issue, might as well be telling his evangelical supporters, by the way, adultery isn't a sin. You read that wrong in the Bible. That part of scripture doesn't exist. So for days now, going on nearly 2 weeks, as we've been reporting out at Rolling Stone, a very fundamental and sort of perversely fascinating aspect about the story is that President Trump and other senior lieutenants in his administration in the White House and elsewhere have been throwing a ton of time and resources at trying to mitigate the damage they've done to themselves, both within the federal apparatus and also outside among the broader, shall we call it, the MAGA sphere, and among President Trump's supporters. They've been doing a ton of damage control and a bunch of outreach efforts, including to top MAGA influencers who Trump himself has been personally beseeching, trying to get them to lay off of him and just, drop this whole Epstein kerfuffle. What we've been picking up on, days reporting on this, is a level of operation that you typically see from administrations and White Houses when they're trying to pass major pieces of legislation on Capitol Hill, not when you're trying to get the Charlie Kirks of the world to lay off of Pam Bondi when it comes to the famous pedophile. So there's a lot of layers to this. A lot of rifts and backlash that's going on throughout MAGA world, not just in influencer communities, but even within the vast federal apparatus and within the very tippy-top levels of federal law enforcement itself. And these are having dramatic consequences for Donald Trump right now in a way that currently has no end in sight. And again, this is all over conspiracy theories that his people long nurtured for years and years. It's absolutely fascinating.
So if you can talk about Dan Bongino, number 2 at the FBI, as it's been described, a former Epstein obsessive. Also Kash Patel, head of the FBI. Is this a true rift between them and Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and Trump, who just talked about speaking with Dan Bongino and that he's doing fine? And then what more do you have on the divisions within the Trump administration around this? For example, J.D. Vance doing damage control and more. And how damaging is this that Trump is telling his own supporters he doesn't care about them anymore, insulting them by calling them weaklings, saying that this is a Democratic plot, when in fact it's come up a groundswell from within the MAGA movement?
Right. Well, when you talk to people close to Donald Trump, whether it's those who work in the upper echelons of his second administration or other Trump advisors, or just people in his broader social and political orbit, one recurring element that they'll tell you in recent days is, look, the way Donald Trump is conducting himself publicly and the way he keeps talking about this and trying to post through it online, it is making it exceedingly difficult for some of his biggest supporters and boosters to not start at least suspecting that he has something to hide, or maybe even that, well, he's kind of acting like someone who is in the so-called Epstein files in some sort of embarrassing or nefarious way. Whether he is or isn't, that's an issue for transparency that Trump and the federal government have the power to follow through on. They're just absolutely refusing to right now and playing all of these different bait and switch games. So like anybody who follows the MAGA fever swamps, even casually, can see that this is something that's not going away anytime soon, and that this is something that, as much as they would like to say over and over and over again, Donald Trump is promulgating these ridiculous conspiracy theories that, Obama and Hillary Clinton wrote the Epstein files, in part maybe to try to get Trump. That's something that just does not stand for people who adore Donald Trump, generally speaking, because that's a conspiracy theory that was just invented out of thin cloth by Donald Trump, and is just not anywhere in the MAGA lore about what these Epstein files may or may not say. And to your other question about what is going on within the actual federal government, not just in far-right influencer communities or whatever. Something we flicked at in our reporting over the past 9 days or so at Rolling Stone is an element which actually hasn't really permeated that much in national political media for going on for quite a while, at least several months. Attorney General Pam Bondi and other officials in Trump's appointed federal law enforcement, like Trump hyper-loyalist Kash Patel, who is, of course, now director of the FBI. They do not like each other. There's been petty feuds and long-simmering tension between them, for personal tension between the two of them for quite some time. And this whole Epstein debacle has only exacerbated that and brought that back to the fore. And also, even more so than that, it's definitely no secret nowadays that the number two at the FBI, Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi, are incredibly distrustful of each other, especially with this whole Epstein mess, and really, really do not like each other to the point where anybody of any level of influence you talk to in Trump land or within the federal government right now will tell you that Dan Bongino has basically torched his reputation or standing, as it were, with other senior lieutenants in the Trump administration, and that no matter how long he officially stays on the job right now, his days are numbered, both because of his own antipathy for the situation and the bridges that he has just burned completely into the sea on this matter. So all of this, it's not hyperbole at all to say that the Epstein affair, as it is right now, has kind of set the Trump administration at its very highest levels on fire and has threatened to tear it apart in the form of, we don't know what in the next week or two necessarily the makeup of the leadership of federal law enforcement is going to be. I also think it is not an exaggeration at all to say that over this issue within the past less than 2 weeks, President Trump has managed to sustain more political damage and self-inflicted blowback on himself than he did when he literally bombed Iran last month. That is an objectively wild thought to consider or to fathom. But if you know anything about how the MAGA grassroots function, it is weirdly expected with how this administration has been going lately.
Swin Subsung, I want to thank you so much.
I am.
Invictus. And discover Invictus Victory Absolute, the new fragrance by Rabanne.
Donald Trump has ordered the US Justice Department to produce more documents related to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. It comes after he threatened to sue the Wall Street Journal for publishing a birthday letter he allegedly wrote to the financier back in 2003. Our US correspondent James Matthews has the details.
This report arises from documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. A collection of letters was handed to Jeffrey Epstein for his 50th birthday. One bore Donald Trump's name. It contains typewritten text framed by the outline of a naked woman, apparently hand-drawn, with a signature Donald below the waist. The note is written as an imaginary conversation. It includes the following. Donald, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, yes, we do, come to think of it. Donald, enigmas never age, have you noticed that? And it ends with Trump, a pal is a wonderful thing, happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret. According to people familiar with the pages of the book, they're among documents reviewed by officials from the Department of Justice who investigated Jeffrey Epstein. It's unclear if these documents are part of the Trump administration's recent review. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, the president has denied involvement. He said, "It's not me, this is a fake thing, this is a fake Wall Street Journal story. I never wrote a picture in my life. I don't draw pictures of women. It's not my language, it's not my words."
Well, that was James Matthews, and this is what Mr. Trump posted on his Truth social platform. The Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch personally were warned that the supposed letter they printed by President Trump to Epstein was a fake, and if they print it, they will be sued. Instead, they are going with a false, malicious and defamatory story anyway. President Trump will be suing the Wall Street Journal, News Corp and Mr. Murdoch shortly. Well, the president's biographer, Michael Wolff, though, says Mr. Trump has until now been reluctant to release these files.
I actually think that that the decision to release the files, or the decision to say they were going to release the files, happened through Justice Department people, and that he was not fully aware of this or aware of this at all. Because the last thing that Donald Trump has ever wanted is to bring attention to the issue of Jeffrey Epstein, because he's very vulnerable on this, because these two guys were the closest of friends for more than a decade.
That was Michael Wolff there. Well, just a couple of months ago, the British ambassador to the United States, Lord Mandelson, told this network, Sky News, that he regrets his association with Jeffrey Epstein.
My knowledge of him is something that I regret. I wish I'd never met him in the first place.
Why did you have an association with him? Because he was in jail at the time.
Why did many people meet him? He was a prolific networker, and I wish I'd never met him in the first place.
Release the Epstein files. No, wait, Epstein is actually a host. No, wait, since everyone is spending a ridiculous amount of time on this, I don't know why, just release all the grand jury testimony, even though that's not what people are asking for, and you can't do it without court permission, and the court will probably block that. Trump's "I'm not involved with Jeffrey Epstein" t-shirt has a lot of people asking questions already answered by his t-shirt. And the funny thing about that meme is that it was originally literally about human trafficking. But the long and short of it is that the MAGA movement may have finally taken a stand against the Trump administration.
The current DOJ under Pam Bondi is covering up crimes.
But back in 2024, candidate Trump made some promises about releasing the so-called Epstein files.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would. During his most recent presidential campaign, Trump said that he would have, quote, no problem looking into the Epstein client list.
The list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah,
It's very interesting, isn't it? But yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it.
Then Attorney General Pam Bondi told everyone that Epstein's legendary client list was right there on her desk. Except it wasn't. Pam Bondi released a 2-page memo saying that actually Epstein did just kill himself. There's no secret client list, and there are no more documents that are going to be released. And everyone believed her, and that was the end of the story. No, I'm just kidding. Trump supporters weren't having it at all. Even Trump's reliable buddies over Fox News aren't buying the narrative.
Why do you say he's become the deep state?
What is more deep state than covering up for pedophiles? And Trump took to Truth Social to post a long screed proclaiming how great Bondi is and telling everyone to, quote, not waste time and energy on Jeffrey Epstein, somebody that nobody cares about. Except that a whole bunch of people care a whole lot about Epstein.
Make some noise if you care about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal.
Raise your hand if it matters a lot to you. Raise your hand. So every hand of 7,000 people.
And now we live in a world where Congress's resident Jewish space laser enthusiast Marjorie Taylor Greene and Silicon Valley progressive Ro Khanna might finally agree on something. And meanwhile, while all this was playing out in the media, the Trump Department of Justice finally acted on Ghislaine Maxwell's plea for the Supreme Court to overturn her conviction after months of delay. Oh, and now Donald Trump is threatening to sue, quote, the ass off of Rupert Murdoch. He's furious because the Wall Street Journal published a story last night about Trump sending Jeffrey Epstein a handwritten birthday card in 2003 where Trump hand drew sketches of a naked woman and then made his signature mimic pubic hair, and which Trump ends the letter with, quote, happy birthday and may every day be another wonderful secret. So suffice to say, there is a lot going on here, both in the media, in the government, and in the courts, and a lot of suspicious timing with how the Trump administration is playing this, and baffling statements from Trump himself. So as the MAGA world implodes, let's take a step back and talk about how we got here, what the Epstein files actually are, and what they are not. And make no mistake about it, apart from all of the fabricated conspiracy theories, the Epstein saga does point to an actual real-life conspiracy that spits in the face of anyone who cares about equal justice and the rule of law in this country. But from the very beginning, everything that touched Jeffrey Epstein reeked of corruption. In 1996, Maria Farmer, an artist in her mid-20s, reported to the NYPD and the FBI that Epstein and his associate, British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, had violently sexually assaulted her while she was visiting his property in upstate New York. Farmer claims that she also warned the FBI that Epstein and Maxwell had committed multiple serious sex crimes against girls, including her minor sister, that Epstein stole nude and partially nude photos of 2 of her minor sisters, and that he possessed child pornography. But neither law enforcement agency followed up on Farmer's complaint. And nearly a decade later, in March of 2005, a woman reported to the Palm Beach police that her 14-year-old stepdaughter had been molested by a wealthy man. In subsequent police interviews, the girl confirmed that she had been recruited by a female classmate, also an undergrad, who had done sexual favors for Epstein in exchange for money. That classmate apparently took the 14-year-old complainant to Epstein's house, where his staff escorted her to his bedroom. Epstein appeared in nothing but a towel and told her to undress and then massage him, and during that massage, he sexually abused her. Now, the unnamed complainant came from a rough background. The underage classmate who recruited her had recently been sexually assaulted before she met Epstein, and this would become a pattern for Epstein. He preyed on girls from poor, violent, and troubled backgrounds, sexually abused them in exchange for money, and then paid them to recruit similarly troubled girls for him to abuse. Now, when Palm Beach detective Joe Ricari began conducting witness interviews, Epstein was quickly tipped off by one of the potential witnesses. Epstein then hired his own private investigators who sought out victims and witnesses, often before they were even contacted by the police. Detective Ricari still managed to identify 17 victims, all in the 14 to 20 age range, all of which recounted a similar fact pattern of the original 14-year-old victim. Recruitment by another girl or woman, ostensibly to give Epstein massages in exchange for money, being told to undress, and then being sexually assaulted or groped, being paid for the massage and sexual interaction, and being offered compensation to find future victims. Now, based on the overwhelming testimony, Detective Ricari provided the state's attorney's office with probable cause affidavit drafts for felony sexual offenses for Epstein and 2 of his female recruiters. State's attorney Barry Kreischer, though, declined to talk to any victims or parents and decided that 17 witnesses just wasn't enough to make a case. So Kreischer offered Epstein a sweet plea deal. When Epstein rejected that, Kreischer made the highly unusual choice to take the matter to a grand jury. Typically, a state's attorney would simply charge and arrest the accused. But during the grand jury proceedings, the prosecutor, Lana Belahovlik, invited only 2 victims to testify before the grand jury, and it appears that Belahovlik actively undermined her own witnesses by peppering the girls with questions about unsavory social media posts and even accusing a 15-year-old victim of being a prostitute. And the state's attorney's office was also in close communication with Epstein's defense attorneys. And in fact, it was Epstein's attorneys who provided the prosecutors with the underage girls' questionable social media posts, which the prosecutors then used to bully their own underage witnesses. And in the end, the grand jury returned only a single charge, felony solicitation of prostitution, which said nothing about the girls being underage. Now, if you're infuriated by this, you're not the only one. Detective Ricari's boss, Palm Beach Police Chief Michael Ryder, one of the few good guys in this sordid story, was also furious enough at the state's attorney's actions that he sent a scathing letter to Kreischer stating, quote, after giving this much thought and consideration, I must urge you to examine the unusual course that your office's handling of this matter has taken and consider if good and sufficient reason exists to require your disqualification from the prosecution of these cases. Detective Ricari also took the extraordinary step of going to the FBI to ask them to prosecute the case since the state's attorney had done such a poor job. But the feds agreed to launch their own investigation. One can only speculate that this was because they already had a file on the guy from 1996 and probably wanted to save face, but we'll never know. But the FBI's reinvestigation turned up evidence of additional victims, including 34 confirmed minors. And the victims reported the same fact pattern of massages and sexual abuse. The feds found pictures of many of Epstein's victims in his house, as well as plenty of other corroborating evidence tying him to numerous underage victims. And armed with this mountain of evidence, the feds sharpened their lawyers' war axes and offered Epstein a slap-on-the-wrist plea deal that should have made national headlines as a travesty of justice, but it did not. Now, back in 2007, we didn't have the tools we have today to get a bird's-eye view of how the Epstein slap-on-the-wrist spread throughout the media and public sentiment. At best, a Google trend history reveals that the search term Jeffrey Epstein peaked at 100 searches and was mostly confined to users in New York. But when you use modern technology, you can see the massive political earthquake over Epstein in real time. We can see that there have been 372 stories about Epstein in the last 3 months, with 46% of the coverage coming from right-leaning sources, 24% coming from the center, and 30% coming from the left. And if you take a closer look at specific stories like the reporting from Wired that revealed editing in the security camera video of the night that Epstein died, you see a fascinating breakdown of how attitudes across political divides are rapidly changing. This story was only covered by about 50 sources, with 40% of the coverage coming from the right. On the left, sources mostly framed the missing footage as critical minutes that point to a larger cover-up and possible conspiracy. On the right, sources largely agreed with the left that the missing footage was critical and were even more likely to embrace the yet unverified as of this recording claims that there exists even more missing footage. In the center, sources typically focused on the problematic nature of the missing footage, but were not as likely to point to a cover-up. Now, headlines and coverage vary greatly depending on the source, which is why I use today's sponsor, Ground News. The Noel Peace Center called Ground News an excellent way to stay informed.
Interested in the Epstein story? I'm so upset about how it's been handled. I don't understand it. Why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And the credible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would say, pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would say, let them have it.